More than 1 in 6 adults suffer with depression as rates rise to record levels here in America. The percentage of U.S. adults who report having been diagnosed with depression at some point in their lifetime has reached 29%, nearly 10 percentage points higher than in 2015. The percentage of Americans who currently have or are being treated for depression has also increased to 17.8%, up about 7 percentage points over the same period. Both rates are the highest recorded by Gallup since it began measuring depression using the current form of data collection in 2015. The most recent results, obtained February 21st through 28th of this year, are based on a survey done of 5,167 U.S. adults. Over 1/3 of women now report having been diagnosed with depression at some point in their life, compared with 20%, slightly above 20% actually, of men. And their rate has risen at nearly twice the rate of men since 2017. Those aged 18 to 29 are at 34.3%. 30 to 44 at 34.9%. Have significantly greater depression diagnoses rates in their lifetime than those older than 44. The survey also finds that the rate of depression amongst Black and Hispanic adults is rising at about twice the rate of white adults. So the question is, what's causing this spike in depression and what can be done about it? For some perspective on this topic and more, we're here with Leigh Richardson. She is founder of the Brain Performance Center in Dallas, a licensed professional counselor, and also wrote the book, Turn Your Brain On to Get Your Game On, the How, What, Why to Peak Performance. Leigh, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you have some personal experience, not just overcoming feelings, but like you actually, between you and your child, had some brain injury to overcome as well. And that could be a completely different, what's the word I'm looking for? A completely different situation to deal with. But tell me about the similarities.
The similarities between a brain injury and something like depression or anxiety.
Well, I guess the obstacles that you have to overcome for both.
Okay. Well, and you're right. Having a brain injury is a whole different world because it affects you. You're more aware of what you're missing. Now, wow, I used to could pick that up and I used to could read that in 10 minutes. And now I'm having to read it 2 or 3 times before I get it. That's a personal statement for me.
Right.
And so you're more aware of what's changed. And usually when you find that you can't do things the way that you used to, that causes some anxiety or some depression because you kind of go through the grieving process. You know, you never really realized how much you liked something until it's taken away. And then when it's taken away, I want it back, you know? So
I guess the question is, when it comes to a traumatic brain injury, what is the likelihood that you get it back? Or is, in some cases, that just not going to be possible? Obviously, I know that there are going to be some traumatic brain injuries where it just isn't possible. But on the whole, is there rehabilitative efforts?
You're right. But I have to tell you, I worked with a gentleman that was in a car wreck, lost his other 2 family members, was in the hospital for a year.
My goodness.
When they kicked him out, he went to outpatient for 6 months. Then he came and he did neurofeedback here. And now he did more than the average person, but he's in school. He wants to become an occupational therapist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that story is on my YouTube channel. So if anybody, you'll have to dig around and find it because it was a while ago. But amazing. When I met him, he couldn't drive himself. He would Uber in and he couldn't work. And he just, by getting his brain in the right regulated state, and he had the desire, he wanted to do something with his life.
Yeah.
And he wanted to do something to help others after what he'd been through.
See, I have a grandfather who passed when I was 19, and I saw him from like age 6 on when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's just slide fast. And you could still see that he was aware enough to be depressed, to be upset about it, but at the same time just becoming sort of trapped in the body without the benefit of the mind that he once had as well. So I guess I'm sort of conscious of what it must be like to go through a traumatic brain injury, to worry about being in that sort of self-prison as well.
Well, and you make such a great point, and that is the body keeps score of everything that's going on in the brain.
Mm.
And once you get people with anxiety tend to have a little nausea or chest, tension or muscle tension. People with depression tend to be very fatigued. It's you will experience in your body what you have going on in your head, and it's almost like a double-edged knife. It's very hard.
You make a lot of sense. And again, I don't like to go anecdotal all the time, but I went through a divorce recently, and bouts of being depressed and the anxiety of the finances, this, that, and the other. You're right. Lethargy sets in. Aches and pains come to be that you weren't previously aware of. It's just fascinating to hear how the body and the brain are sort of taking on extra baggage for each other from time to time.
Well, the brain controls everything, but the autonomic nervous system controls the body. And when the autonomic nervous system gets out of balance, and it doesn't take much, you roll around, you ride the roller coaster, fight, flight, or freeze.
So I wanted to ask you a question, and again, this is a show that's usually based on political perspective. We're seeing the rates of increase in anxiety and depression in this country, and I just have to wonder how much of this is steeped in the political climate that we now live in, this hyper-partisan, nobody wants to get anything done sort of environment where the very slim majority of this country want things a certain way but can't seem to get things to go a certain direction. How much of that is steeped in that reality for Americans?
Well, that reality brings fear and uncertainty. And fear and uncertainty put that autonomic nervous system out of balance. And that where, fight, flight, or freeze. So I believe the amount of uncertainty that we live with in today's world. I was looking at a study from 2016 yesterday, and I was like, wow. It used to be such a nice world in 2016. And in 2023, it's stressful. We've just went through a pandemic, a global pandemic. Right. It's a stressful world.
What happened? I could sit here and surmise what happened in 2016 to 2023, so I guess I'll just leave that to those who want to opine on that. We're with Leigh Richardson, the licensed professional counselor and founder of the Brain Performance Center. So also touching on political and socioeconomic plight and whatnot, we noticed that Black and Hispanic adults have higher rates of depression. Is a lot of that steeped in, again, socioeconomic situations, or is there something more in the DNA?
Well, I think it's influenced by everything you've mentioned, but I will say this: in those cultures, they've been very, very reluctant to accept mental health as a real problem, and now they're reaching out. So their numbers have gone from zero to what they are, and I think a lot of that is just the acceptance and having the courage, because in a culture where it's not looked at with grace, we're reluctant to do it.
You bring up a point about reluctance, and it made me think about my father. My father and I don't have much of a relationship anymore. My mother passed about 12 years ago. She was 58, a little too early in life, if you ask me, to die from cancer. And my dad never really got the sort of therapy that obviously he needed, and he sort of withdrew from family functions and the everyday rigor of staying in touch with loved ones and this, that, and the other. And I'm not going to sit here and absolve myself, but I've made every effort. I live 2 hours away. If I'm in town, he's sick, under the weather, doesn't want to see anybody. Did the holiday stuff as much as we could, but he just never wanted to get involved. But it makes me think, when you speak of reluctance, there's also a reluctance amongst men, period, is there not?
Oh, absolutely. And, statistics show more women report depression, more women report anxiety. And this is a true fact, Ron. On the average, a person will have a mental health issue for 10 years, a decade, before they'll reach out and they'll get help, because there's been so much stigma around it. Mental health, I'm not mentally retarded.
Right.
What people don't get is the brain is an organ, just like the heart is. And if something goes wrong with your heart, you're going to go see a cardiologist very quickly. You wake up and, your son's in town and you just don't feel like you can put it together. You don't feel like you can, and you'll have a little nasty talk with yourself. Power up, man. Get up, get up.
Yeah.
But you just can't do it. And you don't do anything about it. And, 10 years, that's a decade. And that's honestly, Ron, I've just completed all the coursework for my PhD, and I'm writing my dissertation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my goal is to create social change around brain health. It's okay to not be okay. It's not okay when you don't do anything about it.
You mentioned this, and again, it's a political show, so I steer back to politics often. But there just seems to be this clash that's happening between folks who are labeled as being woke and those who want to not have anything to do with the idea of wokeness. Awareness of the plight that others who aren't like them might be going through, and consideration of feelings and empathy and this, that, and the other. Do you see this as well? Do you see this push and pull, this tug of war between, and it seems like it's a mostly white male, not very in touch with their own sort of feelings, kind of battle going on?
Well, I do see that, but I call it something different. I call it lack of self-awareness.
Oh, yeah, me too. That's funny. No, I say that all the time. Oh, my gosh. I say that all the time. The lack of self-awareness among some people is stunning, is it not?
It is. And it impacts their ability to have empathy. It impacts their ability to connect. It's developing your self-awareness is certainly something that everybody, if you don't feel like you have any and you're listening to us, you need to work on. I can help you with that.
So you mentioned that we carry for a decade or more issues that we don't address from a mental health perspective. Is there any correlation between this and the spike in violence in this country? I mean, I know we're a gun culture. Obviously, that's something that is a completely different topic altogether. But we see all of these scenarios where someone snaps and next thing you know, they're at a mall with an AR-15 and shooting people up for God knows what.
And that's something that still, every time I hear it, I feel it in my heart. And I'll feel it in my breath because I honestly believe, and there's two points of view on that. It's either it's a mental health problem or it's a gun problem.
But why can't it be both?
Well, it is. I have a problem with the mental health reason because most of the people, and I've done some research, most of the people that have been mass shooters haven't been diagnosed with mental health problems. I think it's because nobody cared enough about them to take them and get them diagnosed.
Right.
So I'm not saying that there's not a mental health, but that's the why.
Yeah.
The how is the guns. How do they do it? It's the guns.
Yeah.
So you've got to focus on having some type. I still don't understand why an 18-year-old needs to buy a weapon that our police officers and our military don't have access to.
Sure, and that's, again, a topic for another day altogether. And I trust me, I could go off on that all day long. I guess when you add it all up, the hesitance, the reticence to seek mental health therapy or assistance, however you want to term it, along with this push to resist what a lot of folks call wokeness, or as I call it, empathy, consideration of others. And then the affinity for living in a country where you're free to go into a Gander Mountain and purchase an Armalite and an AR-15 to, I don't know, shoot your feelings out on a tree stump out in the woods. It's a toxic combination.
It is.
All right, so you mentioned that you have a YouTube channel, and we mentioned your book title earlier. How can folks learn more about what you do and how they can maybe benefit from knowing more about Leigh Richardson?
They can go to the website, the brainperformancecenter.com, and it's got a lot of videos people will tell me it's easier just to watch a video than to read a lot of information. So
Sure.
that's there. We have LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. We have Facebook and Instagram. And anybody that really has an urgent need for an answer to a question, the first thing we do at the Brain Performance Center is we do 30-minute consultations.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that has an urgent need just call the office, 214-329-9017, and book a complimentary consultation.
Leigh, give me just a minute. We're going to take a quick break, and I want to talk more about your book. You can tell me what all is in there and what we can benefit from having it. All right, stand by. Welcome back to The Ron Show for Thursday. It's a rainy Thursday, and I mentioned that at the start of the last segment, and we're on with Leigh Richardson, who is, first of all, she's a wealth of knowledge. She's also the founder and director of the Brain Performance Center in Dallas, a licensed professional counselor, and author of the book, Turn Your Brain On to Get Your Game On, The How, What, Why to Peak Performance. Leigh, I got to ask you, weather does play a factor in how people feel from day to day sometimes, right?
Well, it absolutely does. And, Ron, that consultation that I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I first opened my practice in 2009, and I would be talking with people and I'd say, wow, I think I hear some depression. Oh, no. And they would look at the floor. Or I think I hear some anxiety. Oh, no, nope. And those shoulders come up to their ears. And that's why I wrote the book.
Okay.
Is just to give people a general understanding of how your mental health determines your physical health as well.
So, Leigh, can I just tell you the reason I don't want to say the reason I launched this show, but a great benefit of me launching this show last October is after my divorce, being a full-time real estate agent, I didn't have the construction of stability in my day-to-day. And this show airs Monday through Friday, 5 to 6 p.m. on American One Radio, and it gives me something that I have to do every Monday through Friday, no matter what week of the year it is, no matter how busy my real estate is. Sometimes you don't have a lot going on in real estate, and sometimes you have too much going on. I have too much going on right now. But I didn't have the structure of the Monday through Friday that I'd gotten used to after working in radio broadcasting for 28 years and then schooling and all that stuff. So we're on the air participating in something that benefited me from a brain function standpoint. In fact, I even like waking up on Saturdays knowing I don't have to do this show. Like it's a legit weekend for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there some of that? Does some of that make sense to what you referred to in your book?
Oh, absolutely. Because structure, I talk about in the book what sleep means to the brain and how environmental factors, the weather impacts your brain.
Right.
In the winter, you can get sad. Living alone. A lot of, I talk about living alone doesn't mean living lonely. You've got to stay connected with others. So we all need structure and social. We need community.
Right.
We need a sense of community. And when you go through a divorce, that sense of community has changed.
You have no idea how legitimate what you're saying is to what I've experienced in the last 16, 18 months of my life, finding out I was going to be divorced. And like I said, I don't have much, family left to adhere to. And so like my in-laws had become my family, and I'm still very close to them, but I don't see them on holidays or as much as we regularly did before. And, I started playing softball in an adult league here, 2 adult leagues actually. And so I'm on that board for one of them even. And that sort of community and some close friends that I had made in the short time I'd been in Atlanta before divorce have really benefited me in ways that I cannot enumerate.
Oh, absolutely. You have to feel it's so easy when you go through a major traumatic change, and that's emotional trauma. And when you go through that, it's so easy to disconnect because you have to work to have something to connect to.
That's right. And again, I'm a real estate agent, so I didn't necessarily always have something to get up out of bed to do if I didn't have something I needed to hop out of bed to do,
Well, and it sounds like, I have to compliment you. It sounds like you've done a great job of self-care.
I literally realized because I didn't have the drive to get up and find the work. If I didn't have the work, I knew something wasn't right with me mentally, because that's always like I was the 60-hour work week radio station manager guy. Like, putting in a full work week was not something that I was, avoiding. And I got to where I didn't find myself interested in doing anything. And so, again, this show sort of sprung from that. It cured a broadcast and political itch for me. And I started talking to a therapist and did so for about 14 solid months. And
good for you.
Yeah, I mean, it just had to be done. I just knew something wasn't right.
Well, good for you.
But even then, listen, again, my mother passed 12 years ago, and my relationship with my family has dissolved. My father has dissolved, basically. So it's not like I was exactly on time with it.
Well, better late than never.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. All right. So what else can we glean from this book? It's on Amazon. By the way, turn your brain on to get your game on. The How, What, Why to Peak Performance.
And it's, it really it's very light reading. It's not anything deep and heavy, but it's written in a way that you can read it. And it makes you think about things and hopefully when you start to have memory loss, what is it? And how does it affect your communication? And what can you do about it? Because, the brain's not fully developed until the mid to late 20s. The 30s are rocking, man. But the 40s start to plateau.
Yeah.
In the 50s, maybe you have a little cognitive impairment. The 60s, maybe it's a little cognitive decline. So being aware of how important sleep is to the brain, that's a great place to start.
Well, and just realizing that you have to start taking notes. You've got to keep things on a calendar. You need the help, so it's there. Use it.
Absolutely.
All right. Leigh Richardson, licensed professional counselor, founder of the Brain Performance Center, and soon to be a doctor, soon to have that PhD, and also author of the book, Turn Your Brain On to Get Your Game On, The How, What, Why to Peak Performance. Again, that's available on Amazon. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I really feel like this has been a rewarding conversation, and if it propels someone to work on their mental self wellness, then all the better, right?
Absolutely. And thank you for being so open and transparent.
Yes, ma'am. I will share all your links in our show notes today at ronshowatl.com and on all the podcast platforms as well. Leigh, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.